So let's kick off our fireside chat. Right, so as you guys all know, this is our weekly drone date with Women and Drones Africa. It's our favorite time of the week to share, to learn, to inspire. And this is our friendly forum to literally support each other. And as I said, you know, learn and inspire. Every week we have cool presentations and even, you know, better chats afterwards. So what I would like to do now is introduce our speaker, our guest this week, and I am so thrilled to introduce my friend Itumeleng. Itumeleng Mokeona is the responsible person, flight operations for Parthenius Air. She's going to be talking about drones for unconventional industries and specifically informal settlements. But let me introduce her, because Itumeleng is a super special person in our industry in South Africa. First of all, may I just do a little shout out to say that she is an international best-selling co-author of Drone Professional too. So for anyone who doesn't know and doesn't have a copy, you should have one, okay? And Itumeleng wrote a chapter in here, and I think she's going to be talking about what her chapter's about this evening. She is a South African civil aviation approved drone pilot and instructor, and her experience includes flying multi-rotor and fixed-wing drones. She's also a certified RPAS maintenance technician. And in 2019, the South African Civil Aviation Authority shortlisted Itumeleng as one of the top 5 aviation professionals. And she was selected as an award winner in 2020 for Wonders of Aviation. Outside of the aviation space, she holds a non-destructive testing diploma. I actually Googled that today, Itumeleng, to see what that was. It's very cool. And she has a BTech in business administration. She's also the founder of Drone Pilot Network, a group that aims to assist people from previously disadvantaged backgrounds to get into the drone industry in South Africa. And she's a firm believer in imparting knowledge and sharing experiences. She has volunteered as a role model for various nonprofit organizations, both within and outside the aviation industry. Besides all of that very cool stuff, Itu is like the nicest person you will ever meet, and she's doing really cool things in our industry. So I hope I did you justice, Itu. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kim, for that overwhelming introduction. I hope I won't disappoint everyone who's joined this evening.
You will not disappoint.
All right. I think without further ado, I'll just begin my presentation. It's going to be very brief because I also to just engage a lot of people as well. But I'll just share what I did now. Okay, I hope you can all see the screen.
Perfect.
Cool. All right, so for this session, I've actually entitled it Drone Technology for Unconventional Industries. Now, you may be wondering, what are those unconventional industries? As we all know, drones are these fancy machines that are so expensive and so cool. However, I've always been the kind of person who looks for something that not everybody looks for when just as a general life principle. So when I got introduced into the drone technology industry, I then wondered how can it actually help the people who are not necessarily in the limelight, the people who are not exposed to these fancy gadgets. And obviously, you know, with aggregates, it's a dirty industry. Without aggregates, we wouldn't be able to have our roads. Without construction, we wouldn't have all of these fancy buildings that you see. In terms of waste management, we can use drones to ensure that waste management is recycled properly to avoid pollution and my favorite out of all is obviously your informal settlements, which is what I will be talking about today. Now, just from what I wrote about in the book as well, there's generally, wherever you go in the country, you are most likely bound to come across an informal settlement. I know some of our guests overseas refer to these informal settlements as slums. Now, from the research that I've done, it's estimated that more than 1 billion people currently live in informal settlements. And it's expected that by 2035, that number is going to double. Now, you can imagine that, especially considering the pandemic that we are experiencing now, that's a lot of people who are going to be living in those informal settlements. But I think by that time, hopefully, we would have been clear of this pandemic. So for many African countries, governments have inherited ex-colonial policies that are ineffective in ensuring that citizens have access to adequate resources and housing facilities. And you'll actually see in this presentation as well as I go on, in South Africa, we've had challenges where even in 2021, with our young democracy, we are still struggling with providing adequate housing for our people. Okay. All right. So, like I mentioned, obviously, the growth of informal settlements generally overloads infrastructure that is already overburdened. We don't have proper facilities for waste collection, for water, for sanitation, for roads, and other necessary facilities that people in these informal settlements need to actually maintain their dignity as human people. And from the research I also did that in South Africa alone, it's estimated that more than 3 million individuals are living in shacks in these informal settlements. And as a result, these growing inequalities continue to contribute to service delivery protests, such as the recent Harrismith protests. Now, if you're in South Africa, you'll be aware that there were a few protests that were going on in Durban, where it was basically around service delivery. I'm just going to go back to that slide. So this image that I've got on the screen over here is from Harrismith Airport. And what basically happened is that there was an airport, and surrounding that airport, there was then an informal settlement that basically engulfed the airport. Now, we know that when they don't have access to services that they need, unfortunately, in South Africa, we know that our government only listens when something goes horribly wrong. And this was the case in Harrismith, where the Harrismith airport was basically torched. As you can see, some of the aircrafts were also vandalized, and that's basically just because people do not have the necessary facilities that they need to ensure their basic human dignity. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the stats. So there was a report that was released, I think it was this year around March, from the South African Human Rights Commission. And basically in that report, it stated that 25% of households in Gauteng, which is one of the provinces here in South Africa, 25% of those households which were supposed to have been upgraded were not upgraded. And again, one in 5 to 1 in 6 households were living in informal households. And now, obviously, because this is during the period of 2019, 2020, this is also when we went through the initial stages of the pandemic. And you can imagine that it was extremely difficult for these people also to have the necessary sanitization to ensure the physical distancing that is needed to ensure that we can ensure that we are safe from contracting this pandemic. again, in the province of Gauteng, the percentage of community households that rely on shared communal taps stands at 8% for Ekurhuleni, 7% for Johannesburg, and 3% for Tshwane. I've also got other stats there where the percentage of households without access to electricity stands at about 20% for Ekurhuleni, 29.2% for Johannesburg, and 15.1% for Tshwane. Now, if you think about it and you take into consideration the fact that these are just specifically metros that are known, what more about the other informal settlements that are not known, and how are those people expected to actually just, you know, be able to have some sort of human dignity and access to adequate resources. So in the chapter that I wrote in Drone Professional 2, we basically conducted, I wasn't part of the study, but I did some research on a study that was done in Cape Town, the Flamingo Crescent study. And in, in that study, basically what was happening is they were going to upgrade informal settlements of Flamingo Crescent, where I think about 405 people were essentially living in that informal settlement, and they were basically sharing 2 taps and 14 chemical toilets. Now you can imagine the just the gross you know, inhumane dignity that comes with sharing a toilet with so many people. So basically, I was fortunate enough, as we did our research through the company as well that I joined, to say what they did was basically give each person an opportunity to say, this is a project that you want to focus on. And I then decided to focus on the informal settlements, because I believe that you know, it's something that needs to be addressed, because a lot of people are living in informal settlements and they pose a great danger, as I've just shown you with the images from the Harry Smith incidents that took place. Because if you think about it, regardless of where you go, most of these people who actually set up these informal settlements, they are going to urban metros in hopes of finding jobs so that they don't have to live in those conditions. However, when they are not able to have access to, you know, to the facilities they need, this is when, you know, anger and frustration comes up, and then we end up finding ourselves with issues where we have a lot of service delivery protests. So my idea, or part of the research that I'm still conducting, is to try and find out how drones can be integrated, because through informal settlement monitoring, what can happen then is that the government has a national the it has a Housing Development Act. Yeah, I think it's called the Housing Development Act, where they are basically compelled to ensure, you know, that citizens of the country are provided with adequate housing. However, because informal settlements increase rapidly so much, it becomes difficult for them to say that if we are going to reblock these people, how many of them are we then going to reblock, and how do you work those numbers out? And again, from this report that was actually done by the South African Human Rights Council, I was quite disappointed to find out that even the budget that was allocated to ensure that these informal settlements are upgraded was not fully used. I think it was about 301 billion that had to be deferred, that was allocated to ensure that these informal settlements are upgraded. But due to lack of efficiency, I guess, from our government officials, that money had to be deferred, and it could not go and help that the people that actually need that help the most. So basically, we are currently in a process, like I said, of doing a study around different informal settlements to ensure we're working together with the Department of Human Settlement to also see how they can better use the budget that they have, and also work with the community to ensure that we don't just come and leave, we don't just come and give them data, but we leave the communities with some sort of skill that they can also use outside once the project has been finished. And I think from there, I'd just like to show this image again. So this was an image taken by Johnny Miller of Unequal Scenes. And if you see on the left-hand side, you can actually see just how, how packed and how there are no roads. You can't even separate which house from another one. And yet directly opposite to that, you've got a golf course in all its greenery and pasture. And you can just imagine that over a period of time, these people on the left, if they do not get the adequate facilities and services that they actually need to give them some sort of human dignity, the green that you see over on the right-hand side will basically be engulfed, just like we saw with the Harry Smith case. And I don't think that is something that we want to see for our community, because then it's also it's a waste of money, because money is spent to building up facilities, and if people go and then destroy it because service delivery is not happening, then that's also going to be money spent trying to recover the facilities that were destroyed in the name of trying to get service delivery to occur. And yeah, I think for now I'll just leave it there. Kim, thank you.
Thanks so much, Itumeleng. Gosh, for us in South Africa, we are very well aware of these challenges, and I'm sure for some of our friends who are on with us, today, they would, find this super shocking. So thanks for sharing those stats. It's always good to see stats that show the bigger picture as well. I wanted to ask you, so the project in terms of the drone tech being used in this manner, what was the output, and what kind of data was it? Literally counting? Was it literally counting dwellings? I mean, what was it that was collected in terms of data and handed over?
Okay, so part of the data that was collected, number one, you can count the number of shacks that there are, and then working with the community, you can try and estimate how many people actually live in a specific shack, for example. And then from there, you'll be able to see, you can also get like the roads in terms of how narrow they are that go through these informal settlements, because you can see even just from this picture, if someone who's living here in the middle, you won't be able to access a vehicle, won't be able to get through there in the event of an emergency. You won't have if an ambulance needed to go in and assist one of the people there, there's literally no structure for vehicles to go through. We're also able to determine, funny enough, like power lines and how many number of some of these individuals living in these informal settlements, they have satellite dishes. So yeah, using the software that we actually have, you are able to count the number of satellites in that specific area. We're also able to generate the manholes around the area. In one of the projects we did, we actually identified that there was no proper way to actually get rid of waste. So what was happening is that the people in the community were basically just dumping the stuff somewhere. And unfortunately, part of that community, there's a stream that connects to the Vaal River, which was obviously causing pollution as well to a certain extent. So the data that we got was actually quite valuable for some of the guys, for your land surveyors and some of the other guys in the council.
That's so fascinating. I just want to read some of the comments here because I think we may have some questions. Desi says, very sad the money was not allocated properly. Seems such a huge need. What an amazing project, Itumeleng. Desi also asked, what are some of the methods you are using to collect the data? So do you want to just tell us about the project, kind of where, because I'm also interested in the reaction from some of the residents with drones, kind of flying over where they live, because I can imagine it would seem quite a threat to them.
Yeah.
What could. So do you want to speak? So the question that Desi had was, kind of what methods are you using, but maybe then answer that part as well around the residents, reactions.
Yeah, so basically the process that we follow, complying with the regulations, of course, we need to engage the community, and generally from the permission point of view, we'll get like a local councillor or someone who's a representative of the community. And now the interesting thing is always that whenever we go there, they want jobs, or they want us to actually pay them to fly there because they feel like, we've got these fancy gadgets and everything. So the community, what we've learned with such projects is that you have to manage the expectations, because ultimately, even if you do try and, provide some of them with food forever, you won't be able to do it for everyone. So we generally try and manage expectations by letting the community know that this is an ongoing project, and obviously because this is a research project for us at the moment, we're not really getting any money for it. However, the results that we are able to get will obviously go a long way in ensuring that the government is able to ensure that the reblocking and the necessary upgrading that is required in those informal settlement is done, which is ultimately the longer term goal for them as well.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm not sure in terms of Desi's question. Basically, what we do is we fly mission points for the areas, and we just process the data and from the processing, we will then we are able to extrapolate the information that we need, such as the number of dwellings and whatever other information that we require.
That's fabulous. There are some other comments and questions here. Queen, hi Queenie, I saw you pop on. Wow, what an impactful project. Well done, Itumeleng, with clapping hand. And Zetu says, quite an interesting use case for drones. Thank you for sharing. Kenelwi said, this is a great initiative, Itumeleng. Cindy Randall, doing great work, Itumeleng. Virginie says, have you published the information for your project? We are doing a similar one in Namibia, and this would be a great reference. Buy the book, Virginie, first. I'm joking.
So for this project, it's still ongoing, so we haven't published anything as of yet. Yeah.
And I guess if this was for research, or if it was for something that would be going to, is it the Department of Informal Settlement? Is that what the department is called that is going to be collecting this information? What's the department that's responsible for?
Department of Human Settlement.
Human Settlement, okay. So I guess that's, where one would do the write-up, but sharing that information would also be a tricky one, right? Because you're kind of collecting information with people, in the pictures and what have you, and they don't really, there's a whole ethical thing there as well, isn't it? Which would be another, another part.
it might be a bit challenging, especially since now we also have the new POPIA Act in South Africa. So in terms of the data that we share, we just need to ensure that we follow all the protocols necessary, and the necessary stakeholders involved are aware of the data that is going to be shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Kamohelo says, this is literally a life-changing project. You have such a great heart, Itumeleng. You guys are going to make me cry again. I always cry on these things. Desi says, thank you. Okay, does anyone have any? Oh, here's another one. Vuchila says, very informative, Itu. Are there any other questions for Itumeleng? We can do a bit of a Q&A if you guys want, or a discussion. Itu, while we're waiting for hands to go up, the other thing, I mean, you would have the data. I think the other thing that would be interesting, and I would probably say that in this image, it most likely wouldn't be an issue for obvious reasons, but a lot of informal settlements go up wherever they go up. And I guess when you're collecting the data and processing it, the kind of topographical information would be quite interesting, because a lot of times, and we've just had this in the Western Cape with all the rains and the floods, these areas seem to get flooded so quickly because, first of all, you know, the informal settlements, as I say, go up wherever they go up. So they're often next to rivers, because that's where, you know, people can have access to water. And also kind of on floodlines and in places where there's not enough drainage. So have you guys looked at that as well?
Yes. So the study that we actually did, where I mentioned that the waste was going into the Vaal River. That was one of the studies where we actually noticed the topography of the area. There was another one that we did in the Vaal, where people were literally situated right on the banks of the river as well. And obviously you know, once the informal settlements goes up, it's like you can't really move them after, I think you have a period of 3 days or something like that. And if you don't remove them within that period of 3 days, then if you need to either relocate them somewhere, or try and see how you can upgrade their means of living, wherever they are. So we do see that quite a lot, where people are, they literally just station themselves, even literally on the banks of the river. And it's quite sad, because we've seen a lot in the past where when we have the floods, it just becomes a whole mess, and they just lose everything.
Yeah, that's so sad. Desi asked, what software do you use to process the data, but specifically for the counting of the dwellings?
The software we use is Pictera.
Pictera.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't heard of that one before. That's cool. And Queen says, this is a typical project for South African flying labs. Are you looking at other strategic partners, tech for good, STEM and disaster management related projects?
Yeah, I think we haven't really looked at it thus far, because we've been doing it as an internal project. But yeah, I think we'll definitely be looking for such opportunities as well in the future.
Good. So you and Queenie need to have a conversation, yeah? Kelly says, well done, Itu. Onwards and upwards. Would be interesting to see the findings. And she's got to jump off, but we did know that she's got another call to get on. So she says, well done, keep shining. How many on your team, asks Desi?
In our team at the moment, still relatively a small team, less than 10.
Cool. And Shadow says, hi to me. We are also collecting data on the movements of people, example, economic activities, social activities, etc. Shadow, do you want to tell us more about that? I'm going to put you on the spot, but it sounds very interesting.
So basically, I'm just interested in how they could actually study the behavior of people. Yeah, and what sort of data they can also collect from that.
Tumi, tell us quickly where are you, where do you work, what are you collecting this data for?
For now, I can't disclose that information. Yeah.
Okay, and to me, from your sorry, no, who asked this question? Sorry, I said to me, Shadow. Shadow, what are you studying what are you studying that would make you interested in the data?
Okay, basically, like, I just did my honors in industrial psychology, and it's something that I would really like to venture into. But then my biggest interest is literally like human factors. So that's what I'm focusing at right now.
That's super interesting for sure. I'm sure there's a lot. Oh my gosh. We should connect you to Tamiko Show, who she was on this platform as well. She's doing a big study, a big white paper. Do you know her? Have you heard of her?
No. Unfortunately not.
Okay. She's working with some master's students, but they're, yeah, so maybe I'll connect you. Just connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll connect you to her. Okay. All right, cool. Thanks for that. Chapiso says, with regards to the collection of data and all the traveling that needs to be done to get to these places, do you guys have some form of sponsorship, or is it all from your company? Good question.
Everything we've been doing at this moment is actually self-funded. There are some other projects we've done with other partners as well, where we offered our flight services to the people, and we didn't charge them for everything. But yeah, in terms of finance, we don't have anyone backing us up at this moment, so it's just self-funded.
And you know, at some point there'll be some other tender that will go out. I think there have been tenders already, and hopefully you'll be in a good position to be able to get that tender, right? To do work across the whole country. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I think the Department of Housing Development, yeah, I think it's the Housing Development, can't remember, but Department of Housing Development actually had a tender issued. It was last year sometime.
Yeah.
But then they ended up canceling it. So I'm hopeful that maybe other opportunities will still come up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
yeah.
I guess, yes.
Sorry, I would say another thing, Itumeleng should consider environmental consultancies. I mean, I used to be an environmental consultant, and you need, looking at this information is really important when you're doing environmental impact studies. Is whether you're looking at it from a disaster management side or whether you're looking at it from a formalization of these areas. And that kind of information is critical because it really gives an environmental consultant far better quality information about what's going on within the environment of the informal settlement as well as what's around it. And as you say, if you've mapped out that it's on a floodline or something like that, those are other tenders to look for and collaborate with environmental consultants as well as planners. But don't forget the environmental consultants, because that kind of information is absolutely critical to having a proper picture as to what the future impact can be and how you can manage that.
I think that's a great point, Louise. And Itumeleng, you mentioned there are so many comments. This chat box is busy. I'm going to get to them now. I was just going to say, you mentioned earlier on, Itu, about the pollution of rivers, right? So a lot of these informal settlements are high up at the source or at least along the river. And then you've got these, rich areas and well-developed areas at, along the river, kind of further down. And there's a lot, and of course at the dams, and a lot of work that's going on to try and understand why the rivers are so polluted. And it's becoming a major health crisis, because some of those dams are being used, for water for local communities, etc. But if the environmental agencies or even private companies want to try and understand where that's coming from, for them to pay you, to have the data, as Louise said. So I think that might be an angle, because the water issue in South Africa is also like a big drama, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand.
I think it's absolutely incredible, because after, what we've also noticed is that with most of these informal settlements, they also run along railway lines. So where there's a rail track running or something like that. And obviously we also know that, they'll go and steal some copper cables and things like that, again, to try and, provide some sort of means for themselves. But another thing that we noticed is, I don't know if you know, there's an airfield when you're going to the Vaal again, Tedderfield Airport. And what we have noticed there as well is that, there's the informal settlement around that area is also growing. And so the owners there and some of the business owners are like, they're quite concerned as well, because what if the Harry Smith incident also happens there? And because it's already grown, it's a situation that needs to be addressed before, because people just can't just come flying in and out with their nice airplanes, and yet people are just there. So it's quite interesting to see just the amount of inequality from this data.
Yeah. It's crazy, actually. Jackie says, great research. I just discovered your organization yesterday and will share with my geology students your work. What type of drone do you use?
For the surveys at the moment, we've actually been using small ones, this one over here, the Phantom 4s. So we're still looking at getting bigger aircraft as well. Like I mentioned that, everything is self-funded at the moment. However, we are licensed to do operations with fixed wings as well. As you mentioned earlier, in my background, I've done some fixed wing flying as well. I'm also a fixed wing instructor, and the ideal type of aircrafts that you want for these information is obviously your fixed wing drone, because you're also able to do BV loss missions for longer. So from a approval point of view, I think we are covered, because we're also BV loss approved as a company. So but the crafts that we have for the moment have actually been quite helpful thus far.
Yeah, I'm sure anyone on here who's operating drones would know that P4 is a workhorse of note. It'll do most things. That's brilliant. And Jackie also says, how many drones to complete the project?
So I can't really say how many drones, because like you just mentioned, Kim, it's a workhorse. Yeah. I think the biggest area we've done in a single day thus far was probably just over 200, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere, I think it was over 200 hectares or something like that.
So as long as you've got enough batteries, you're fine. That thingy flies, isn't it?
As long as you got enough batteries, you're good.
Yeah. And Jackie said, I'm located in Chesterfield in the USA. And Jackie, so nice to have you on here. And let us know what your students think when you share. Pumilele says, I would like to volunteer or shadow you on this project. There you go. We've just recruited you someone. Thank you for volunteering, Pumelele. Desi says, when you said manage expectations, how receptive have the people been? Do they see the value?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So what we also generally try and do is make sure that if we are going to be operating within a specific area, if the people aren't really as receptive, obviously taking into consideration that we do have all the permissions and everything, we will basically launch from a safe site or also have security on site. But we haven't really had any major issues thus far in terms of security regarding that. Yeah.
Just for other people on the call who don't know, there are issues where the authorities and maybe some of the residents around there, you know, that example in that picture that Itu just showed with the golf course, which is essentially going to most likely, I don't know where that picture is, be part of a golf estate. So now you will have homeowners that will be complaining about this informal settlement. Excuse me. And so, you know, there will be authorities that will now try and come and remove these people. And like Itu said earlier on, they'll be like, well, where are you rehousing us to? So, you know, that kind of, there could be aggression or could be a response to suddenly seeing a drone with a camera. People know there's a camera, right? And so they could be like, why are you doing this? Are you trying to help us, or are you trying to help them remove us, right? You could probably come against some of those scenarios as well.
Yeah, we've actually had such, but I think once we explained to them the project that we were doing, they were a bit more lenient. But initially, if you don't go and inform them of your intentions, that's when they become a bit apprehensive, and they try and become defensive. So
yeah, I guess the communication with maybe the community or whatever, that there's normally a leader, right? Someone who's kind of organized themselves to communicate. Zetu says, I'm sorry, I came in late. I just wanted to find out, especially in the stakeholder engagement process, does the project benefit the communities or not negatively affect them if, for example, they consent or partake? I know occupation is mostly illegal in informal settlements, but is the social impact addressed?
Can you just repeat that question again?
I think you've probably answered it, but let me just see if I can. So basically, what Zetu's asking is, in the stakeholder engagement process, is there something that ensures that the project benefits the communities? And do the communities, I'm taking from this question, Zetu, just shout if I'm not articulating properly. And if it isn't benefiting them, does the community actually have a choice? Can they say, I don't want to consent to you flying over me, over our area?
So I think I did address the question earlier, but again, remember, we don't deal specifically with all the individual households of the member. So we will go to the necessary counselor or representative for the community, and then they will be the one who engages the community on our behalf. And once that engagement has been had, then obviously we can continue with the process. But we try and ensure that they are involved, because ultimately, like I said, from an aerial point of view, using the software, we can be able to count the number of shacks and everything. But if you're going internally and deeper as to how many people are actually within that kind of informal settlement, this is when you now have to also engage the community on a deeper level, because then you'll be able to understand how many people you are dealing with. So we try and make sure that the community understands that the project will ultimately benefit them in the end. And once they actually understand that, because what I saw was like with the case of the Flamingo Crescent guys, once that project was actually completed, those guys were then able to go and visit people from other informal settlements and let them know that, you know what, we've actually been through this process and it works out. Obviously, it might take a bit of time and you will experience challenges along the way. But I think as long as the people know that ultimately it's for them to benefit at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cindy Randall says yes to the Phantom 4. Brilliant. Desi says, Itumeleng, thank you so much for sharing. So heartbreaking to see. You are doing amazing work. So we all think that that's just, and I really hope that this work gets picked up by someone who can either fund it or the council works that into their processes. I think in South Africa, and this is just a personal opinion, and someone counter it or add to it, but I think there's so many parts of kind of law enforcement and then public safety agencies and government agencies that work in silos, and the municipalities are really trying to relocate some of these informal settlements, and so having this data would facilitate that and make it easier, right? So they can count how many people there are, they can see what the issues are, and that can then help them communicate and help them find, another location. The municipalities probably can't afford the services, right? Yeah. Or they probably aren't able to kind of link it into their processes, which is so sad.
Mm. But like I said, I think I had that form somewhere. Yeah, so from the report I was actually telling you about, which is why it's just heartbreaking. So the funds that were actually deferred from Mangaung was 301 million, Ekurhuleni was 120 million, Tshwane was 200 million, and Cape Town was 60 million. So now you can imagine the funds are there, but now the people are actually not using them for what they've been allocated for. So obviously there's a disconnect somewhere. And like I said, I think if we just, I don't know, had a heart for people and ensured that, even if you're not getting something out of it, but the fact that you are actually just doing your job at the end of the day. Because I think it's really a waste to say that there was funds allocated and they were not used in the manner that they should have been. And people obviously, suffer as a result of that as well. So, yeah.
Gosh, needless to say, it is a massive, massive socioeconomic challenge that this falls into, that, I guess if it was easy to solve, someone would have solved it, but it is just such a huge thing. And so I don't know if everyone can do their part, but it's the same as in the security work that we do. We really need to make sure that the government is willing and able to have private sector work with them. And if that collaboration can happen nicely, then I think, you'll start seeing some of these things bear fruit. But please keep us updated. Come on again and share with us. And if there's any help you need, pull people in, like if you need extra drones or you need people, and Queen obviously has a whole network with flying labs and case studies and all sorts. So pull people in where you need help. People will always, well, let's say always help for sure. Itumeleng, we have a few more minutes. And so I, number one, I wanted to thank you for sharing this project, because it is just such an eye-opener and a reminder of, you know, how lucky a lot of us are to be, yes, we're freezing in our homes, but we have homes, you know? And so it's a good reminder to really appreciate what we have. And secondly, to you know, appreciate what you are doing. And I really hope you get rewarded for that in some way. But I want to ask you, as a already recognized individual in our South African drone industry, what's been the greatest challenge for you? And also, what's been the greatest kind of achievement and joy for you? So I'm going to ask you those two questions.
The greatest challenge. Sure. I think that's a difficult question to answer, purely because I think being in this industry on its own is a challenge, because the industry literally goes at the speed of lightning. So to kind of keep your head above the water and feel like you know what you're actually doing, I think it's challenging as well, because you constantly need to stay on top of the ball. You constantly need to be aware of what's happening, and that can be overwhelming at certain times. I remember, I think with everything, initially when I started out from being just a cadet with looking forward to getting my RPL, I thought, you know, the skills test was the biggest thing of my life. And then I went on to do my instructors, and I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then I did that, and it's I was given the opportunity to also just be the pilot of BPIC for our company when we did our BV loss audit, and people had been like, it's so difficult, and you constantly just, you know, jumping mountains every day. The other day, I think I told you, Kim, we experienced the drone. I lost the drone for the first time in my life. I didn't know what I was gonna do, but fortunately enough, I think I've got some lucky people who like me upstairs. I managed to find the drone after like 24 hours. So they constantly challenges, and I think just the love for the industry, I guess, and the love for what I do is what keeps me going as well. And yeah, I think for me, the accomplishments go hand in hand with the challenges, because when you're able to overcome, you also kind of accomplish in a certain way as well. I mean, last year, nobody knew my name. This year, you know, my name is one of the international bestsellers. So I think, yeah, there's
Yeah, there you go. Do it again. Bit of a shameless plug there for you guys, for us all.
So yeah, I think it's just a great industry to be in.
That's amazing. That was such a nice way of saying, as you develop in an industry and become a leader, you also have your challenges get bigger, obviously. Yeah. And then, so like you say, looking back, your RPL was your biggest challenge. And now you've had to deal with, you know, a reportable incident to the CAA, which is like every drone operator's nightmare in South Africa. It's like, you do not want a missing drone. You do not want a crashed drone, and you do not want a missing drone. Yeah. But that'll be a story that you've walked away from, and you can tell other people that story for sure. We have just a couple more comments, and honestly, Itumeleng, well done. This has been so inspiring, and this chat has been on fire. So I hope I haven't missed anyone. Shepiso says, do you perhaps have some ways the community members can benefit from the project, like job creation, like maybe you have observers from there? That's always a good question.
Yeah, so ultimately, like I said, that is what we are hoping to do, to ensure the community gets involved. However, because at the moment, like I mentioned, we've been self-funding. So in terms of bringing other people on board at the moment, it's been a challenge. But the long-term goal is to ensure that the community actively participates, so that, like I said, they're able to use the skill elsewhere, even after the project is complete and done.
Yeah, no, that's and it's a very good question, Chapiso, and good answer, Itumeleng. And just a kind of an adage there, from a drone operator perspective, anyone who comes near your drone who is part of your operation has to be background checked. They have to be trained as an observer. They have to have aviation security certification. So because if something happens, suddenly you'll be like, okay, well, who was your observer? And you'll say, well, it was this person who's part of the community. And we haven't done all these checks, because they would be part of your flight ops, right? If you wanted to do it by the book, of course. But always nice to have that at the forefront around trying to engage the community. Carolyn says, building up a foundation of humanitarian efforts that can help the council members take a thorough advocacy effort to address so many needs. Yeah, absolutely. And Siku says, Itumeleng, very inspiring. Sign me up as a volunteer. So anyone who said they want to volunteer or help or work shadow, please connect with Itumeleng on LinkedIn. And I did put her LinkedIn profile in the chat right at the beginning. So just scroll up before we sign off. Chapiso says, this is so amazing, Itu. Shadow says, very inspiring with the heart. How do you do that, Shadow? How can you put a heart in the chat? Is it a fancy thing? I've never managed to do that. You can't right click, right? I can't. That's very cool.
Struggling.
And Sharon says, outstanding. Thank you for sharing. Marina says, oh, hey, Marina. Great session. What an amazing project, Itu. And Millicent says, great initiative as a new drone pilot. This is inspiring. And what an amazing, no, there you are, Itumeleng. And what an amazing word to end our fireside chat this week, inspiring, which is everything that this was tonight. And Cindy says, thank you, everyone. Great work, Itumeleng. Thank you for sharing. Well done, Itumeleng. I'm so glad we had you on. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for answering questions. Thank you, everyone who was on here. I actually think this was a record attendance. Did we top 30? Record attendance. So it's creeping up every week. But Itu, you have had the record attendance on our fireside chat. Patricia, inspiring indeed for us who are new to the industry. Thanks, Itu. Patricia's actually on a drone incubator program. And so Patricia's planning on starting a drone business. So these, Patricia, I hope we see more of you, because these chats are all about getting inspired and learning and picking up information and sharing. So well done, Itumeleng. Thank you again. Thank you, everybody. Please stay safe. Please stay healthy, because, in Gauteng, where we are, we have this damn third wave, which is apparently today we've hit the peak. So if that's the case, that's good news. But please stay safe, everybody. Please go to Women in Drones Africa. Please join as a member. We are going to start sharing some information on that platform as well. The Women in Drones platform and the website is super informative. It's basically a world of network that you get, and the membership fee has been adjusted for our kind of local situation. So good night, good morning, and we will see you next week for our drone date. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.